Hello CIS25. This is a video on Unit 10 lecture which covers Chapter 6, Part 2, page 553 to 647 in the book. In this week, we're going to talk about utilities in Windows OS and also use other utility in other OSs to be able to manage the system and troubleshoot the system. To start off, we have covered Windows Memory Diagnostic in the prior lab, but just to jog your memory, this is a tool that's used for the system to test cache memory in your Windows desktop. So when the system cache in data, it's because it's going to frequently use that data, and that will take up space in your RAM. So in the case where if we want to look at what information is stored as far as for diagnostic tool, we would use Windows Memory Diagnostic Tool Test. And to launch it, you can use Windows R to do the run command and then do the mds schedule.exe. Then it's gonna allow you to select the option whether you want to reboot or not. And also we did a lab on this. In this week's lab, we also touch on msconfig. And msconfig is a utility that allows us to control services and program, possibly at the startup. There are other features to be able to use msconfig to manage going directly to Task Manager with it. And so you can search for this using the search bar. And that is going to find the system configuration, and I simply type in msconfig. And here, this allows you to change up your startup options. We can do diagnostic startup. That's what we did in the lab, which loads less of the services compared to your normal startup. And you can also select different type of services that you want. So in the case when you are troubleshooting a system, you can choose the diagnostic startup, or if you do selective, you can load startup items only, or you can load some of the services. And also in the boot, we can select safe boot, or we can select certain type of boot when it loads the OS. So in the safe boot, that's going to give you the minimal options where it doesn't have all the services enabled. If you want to have alternative shells so you can run your script, you can do that. So there are other options under the boot as we've seen in the lab. And then here you can look at the services and the startup that will take you to the Task Manager and then additional tools. This will allow us to access other tools in Windows OS. So then the next part, it talks about using Task Manager. You can use Task Manager by pressing Ctrl-Alt-Delete and select Task Manager, or you can also press Ctrl-Shift-Escape, or you can just search for Task Manager. And this is going to allow you to open up your Task Manager. So in the Task Manager, you would see the tasks that are running. You can right-click the task and be able to expand it or end it when you need it to stop. You can take a look at the processor, the memory used, and the performance of your system, app history, startup, users, details, and services. So these are all the things that we can take a look at. So for example, if you have processes that are running because you have a malware, you can go in here and find out what is running. You can end the task. You can go and locate where that executable is and be able to see how you can contain it and not delete it, because we don't delete the malware. We want to contain it. Malware usually infects system files, so if you delete it, it's going to cause issue. So here it talks about Windows 7. However, we're using Windows 10, which is going to be similar. Task Manager allows you to manage resources, CPU, memory, page file, caching, application services, users, and network services. So in the question, we are going to answer the first few questions. One, what is the function for Windows Memory Diagnostic Tool? How do you access this tool in Windows 10? Memory Diagnostic Tool is used to test system and cache memory before the Windows desktop is loaded. It can be started by pressing Windows R and type in mdsthed.exe, or you can simply search for it on the task search bar. Then for number 2, Pulse Windows 7 is unstable, runs more slowly than usual, or has problems starting up or shutting down. Which Windows administrative tool is useful in determining whether the program or the service running when the system starts is at fault? That will be msconfig. We would use msconfig in order to check out the type of services that's running at startup in the application that's running at startup. For number 3, it asks you how to access Task Manager in Windows 7 PC. You can right-click the taskbar and select Task Manager. You can press Ctrl-Shift-Escape to be able to access Task Manager. You can also use the Run or the search box on the taskbar like this and be able to type in Task Manager. Or you can press Ctrl-Alt-Delete and select Task Manager. So there are several ways to be able to access this, and make sure you know this for CompTIA A+. Now, Windows 8.1 Task Manager, similarly, you're going to see the same thing. The graphical user interface, they slightly change it, but in general, we would use it to determine system performance, be able to manage our tasks. And in the lab, we also talk about how to use command prompt, and we can take a look at our task using task list command and be able to see your process ID and the amount of RAM allocated for each of the process. It looks slightly different than your task manager. However, you will be able to use it to look at the type of task that's running. And if you need to end a task in the lab, we've done task kill as a command to be able to end the task. Now, in the next part, it talks about disk management. So when you use your disk management, you can simply search for it here. And disk management can be also accessed using your computer management console. So I right-click the Windows button and I select disk management or computer management. So in computer management console, you will be able to see disk management. And if you right-click Windows and you choose disk management, you would be able to see disk management as well. So in disk management, we would see that we would have the disks that are installed in the system and configured, meaning that we have create sections of the disk, and we would be able to format the disk for storage. For example, on my D drive here, I have formatted as NTFS, New Technology File System. And in the last lab, we've done that. We also looked at OS, which is on C, that's NTFS. So when you're using the newer Windows, you want to use NTFS. And it also gives you the status and the type of disk that you're using. So on the basic disk, this data partition 1 here, which is, it's going to assign the next letter up. Now we can right click the disk and we can change the letter in the path, or we can also shrink the volume, and if we need to, we can delete the volume, which wipes out all your data. Now on the right here, we can do the same thing with the OS, where we can shrink it down, but just keep in mind that you want to back up your file before you do that. And in that volume, it's going to tell you that whether it's a boot volume, which allows you to boot your OS, and it will have the operating system files that would need. Now, when you create the partition, which is a section of the disk, you would see that it would create a small section on that drive for your UEFI. And I have also created a section for recovery, which allows me to put it back to the default setting. To initialize the disk, we would then need to right-click the disk, and in your disk management, if it's not initialized, you can initialize it doing this way. Right-click and be able to turn it on and initialize. Now, when I right-click at this point, it only allows me to convert to dynamic disk, which I don't want to do, but you can do that. And the same thing with this one here. And if you go to disk property, it's just going to tell you the size, and then you can implement policy and driver for that disk. So in the next question, it asks you, when should a drive be mounted? So a drive would be mounted when the PC needs to connect to the drive or multiple drives for additional storage or temporary storage. We would have an OS which sits on the C drive, and we can mount additional disks in order for the system to use it for additional storage. And for number 5, it asks you, when should a drive be initialized in Disk Management Console? When you want the drive to be connected and to be seen by the system. So once you physically install that and enable it in BIOS or UEFI, you need to look at your disk management configuration and make sure that the drive is initialized, because it doesn't always necessarily do that automatically. So here it talks about initialization of your disk on the bottom of page 2. And then in some cases, you will be working with arrays, which are a group of disks that allows you to store backup files or just operating files. And we can span it on across multiple disks. And in the past, I know we talked about RAID before. So we can span it between, let's say, disk 0 and disk 1, where it's gonna write across both disks. And it will combine the capacity of the disk together. So if I have 1 terabyte on disk 0 and 1 terabyte on disk 1, that's going to be combined to be 2 terabyte. And for Stripe, data is then being written fast, and it can go from one disk to another. And the way that we Stripe is that we would set it up with RAID 0, and so that way it would write across both disks. Or you can use mirroring, and mirroring allows you to copy the exact duplicate from disk 0 to disk 1. Now, the downside about mirroring is that you're only going to be having 50% of the capacity. If you have 1 terabyte on disk 0 and 1 terabyte on disk 1, when you mirror, you're only going to have the total capacity of 1 terabyte, even though you have 2 disks that are 2 terabyte, as the data is exact duplicate. And lastly, RAID 5 allows you to write data across all disks. It does have some array error checking, where it would be able to determine if there is this writing error. So now on RAID 5, you have to have 3 disks at least. And if one of the disks fail, it's still functional, but 2 disks, if 2 disks fail, it will not work. So you will lose your data. So the way that you set up your RAID is that, of course, you have to physically install the drive, and these are the specific type of drive. They're called RAID, redundant array of disks, inexpensive disks actually, but in general they are affordable. So you would then need to add the type of disk. So in your UEFI and BIOS, you have to enable RAID. Then you would need to initialize the drive. And here it walks you through the step. You need to mount the drive. you need to assign it a letter, you can set up the volume name for it, and then you would click Finish. Now, if you want to convert it to dynamic disk, you can click Yes, as what we've seen when we right-click the disk. So here it gives you the screenshot for that. Now we can create storage space in Windows 8.1 and Windows 10. We would see that we can set up storage spaces. So if you set up storage spaces, that allows you to create a group of drives for storage. And it's going to be able to display the type of drives that you want to select for storage space. This is something that was implemented for the later Windows, and it will look something like this. But we can simply set that up so that way we would have backup of our drive. So in Windows, we would have different type of utility. Regedit allows you to launch Register Editor. Registry Editor does help system performance a little bit when you're trying to clean up some of the unnecessary files that store in the registry. But be careful, because if you delete the wrong file, it does impact your system and it will have issues. Command prompt, we've seen that before by using CMD, and command prompt allows us to control our system using commands. And what you can do in graphical user interface, you will likely have the parallel commands, and Windows does provide some help option if you want to find a command. Microsoft Management Console, MMC, allows you to use the Microsoft Management Console and add in the tools. So if I'm seeking Microsoft Management Console, I just type in MMC, and it's going to give me the icon with the red toolbox. Then with that, what we will be able to do is we will open this up, and we can go File. We can add or remove snap-in, and we can add necessary tools. So in the lab, we have used Event Viewer. I can add that. And for my local system, I can also add things like Share Folder. And I can also add Task Scheduler or Performance Monitor, or whichever tool I need. So once I have those, I will be able to use the utility in one console, so that way I don't have to switch back and forth. And you can save this console, because if you exit, it's going to ask you if you want to save, so you can come back to it another time. So this is the Microsoft Management Console. Make sure we know that for the A+. We can also use MSTSC, which is Remote Desktop Connection. And this allows us to connect to another desktop. This uses RDP on Windows environment. And so you can put in the information about the computer you want to connect to on the domain or IP. And then you will be able to set up the connection if that system allows you to connect. Notepad is just a text editor. We can use that to write script, create real simple text file, Txt. Explorer allows you to look at, there are two types. So there's File Explorer and there's Windows Explorer 7, and that would look like the folder icon where you would see that, your files and folder. Directx Diag is your Directx Diagnostic. And when you run this, it's going to start loading the drivers, and it asks you if you want to sign digitally. So you can check your driver, and it's going to help you diagnose the Directx. Directx is used in Windows system for different type of web services. So you can use that to be able to diagnose Directx. Now for this defragmenter and optimizer, we've used that. That allows us to rearrange the file on stored, that store on disk, to be in contiguous space, especially on HDD Flash drive doesn't matter, or flash memory like SSD does not matter. But on HDD, you can rearrange your file so that way it will optimize the space and be able to give you extra space as it will put the file together instead of scattered across the drive. System Restore allows us to reset the system to the previous configuration, and that this only is doable if you have a restore point. So here it walks you through each of the utility, what regedit would be, and how to start regedit. And if you want to make a backup of it, so you can set up an export of it and then save it. Your MSTC, how to be able to set up your remote desktop. Your MS info, which is your system information. And this gives you the information about your hardware, about your software, about your I/O, about your components. And it does take a little bit to pull up. So to answer the question, for number 6, when should you use storage space in Windows 8.1? When you setting up RAID, or when you're creating a storage pool. That means that multiple disks to be able to use it for data storage. For number 7, we need to identify 2 to 3 Windows System Utility tool, and that's easy. We can list regedit, command prompt, services.msc. So another way that you can look at services is to look for services. Everything is searchable. And it tells you what type of services is running. If you need to end a service, you can just right click, you can do a stop. Or if you need to restart a service, you can restart here. We can also list MMC, Microsoft Management Console, MSTSC, Remote Desktop Connection, Notepad for text editor, Explorer for file management, for MS Info 32 for Windows System Information, Software, Hardware, Txt Diag, Disk Defragmenter, and Optimizer, System Restore, and MS Config. So in Windows 8, in Windows 7 for number 8, when should you use regedit? First, you should use regedit to view a system setting that cannot be viewed through other interfaces. Regedit store everything, all the hardware information and the software information that's installed on your system. So if you install the hardware and configure that hardware, it updates the database in registry. Now, if you need to add or modify or remove registry key that cannot be changed in normal Windows menus and application, then you would use regedit. This might be necessary to remove traces of program or hardware device that you cannot uninstall properly, or to allow new devices or program to be installed. You can also use regedit to backup registry file, so that way you have a record of it. Number 9, a client asks for assistance in troubleshooting his Windows 10 professional PC. Which utility you use to access his computer remotely for the troubleshooting process? You can use MSTSC, which is Remote Desktop, and that allows you to connect to the system if that system is connected to the network. For number 10, it asks you, how do you create a system restore point in Windows 10? First, you would search and enter system restore. So we can do that now. And in Windows 10, it's going to give you 2 options: reset this PC or create a restore point. So you can choose create a restore point You can use control panel as well. It's going to push it to control panel. And in that, if I want to do system restore and I want to create a restore point, once I click here, I can select where I wanted to restore to, and I will be able to create. So you need to first configure, and you need to be able to create. So if you don't have that already, you can create a restore point, and if you have created it already, then it's already there. So you just have to restore when you need to. So then we can name our restore point and then click create, and the computer current hardware and software configuration would then be stored on the restore point. So system restore information is located on page 8. Make sure we know the step on how to create the system restore point. And for Windows 8.1, Windows 10, and Windows 7, because A+ will ask you. Now, here on page 9, it talks about what you should try before you have a restore point, before you use it. You should try using advanced boot options, which is F8. And F8 in Windows 7 would allow you to access Windows boot menu, which allows you to select last known good configuration, which is the last point where Windows 7 is actively working. In Windows 10 and Windows 8, Microsoft has disabled this feature. So you would have to use the startup option in UEFI and be able to access it. So when you press F8, it gives you Windows Advanced Boot option menu. And so when you're using System Restore to fight virus and malware or create a restore point while the system is infected, it continues to be infected because you didn't correct the problem. So what you want is, if you want to prevent reinfection, you would then disable the restore point, and then you would fix the problem first, because it will likely infect also your restore point. So in the next question, it asks you, how do you access the last known good configuration option in Windows 7? We would use F8 when we boot. So when you turn on the system, you would press F8, and that allows you to access Windows Advanced Boot menu. This, you can use your arrow key to go down to the last known good configuration, which lets you access the last time, the image as it captured it for the last time that Windows 7 was actively working. For number 12, Samantha's computer is infected with the virus. Should Samantha create a recovery point on her system to fix the issue? No, because the restore point will contain a malware which can reinfect the system when the system is reverted to the created restore point. So Samantha should disable the restore point or not create the restore point, but remove the malware or contain the malware. Okay. For 13, it asks about safe mode options. So in Windows 8.1, when you press the power button, if you hold down the shift key and click restart, it's gonna let you go into the advanced options. So you would then, because on Windows 8, there's a button on the top right for power. So you would click the power, and then you can also you can hold down the shift key and then click tap restart. And this takes you to advanced option in the startup settings, and then click restart. Now in the notes it talks about updates, and updates is very important. We want to be able to run updates so it fixes some of the problems, security problems, or application problems. So updates can be accessed in Windows 10 using settings, update security, Windows update, and check for updates. If you have it on auto updates, occasionally it will notify you that updates is downloaded, and you can install it at the next startup. Safe mode is here, and in the last question you can refer to page 9 to be able to answer that. And it will look like this. So next we're going to talk about control panel utility. And control panel will give you a lot of different type of access to manage your system. We can use control panel to be able to configure your system or your security setting. You can also create user account in that. You can use network and internet configuration there. Personalize your display, and then change region, look at hardware, and uninstall the program. And then for accessibility, we need to make sure that it is in large font, or there are other accessibility tools here. So for performance, your system would use your disk space to be able to save a page or a file, and this is referred to as virtual memory. And virtual memory is important in that it will be slower than RAM, but it doesn't take up RAM storage. It uses your disk storage, and it will allow the system to use that to be able to improve better performance. You can make adjustment to virtual memory, and to manage that, we would go to System Property and then go to Advanced Settings under Tasks, and then be able to use the performance box in Settings, and then we can change that. I believe we did a lab that addresses this, so you can increase your page file and be able to have improved performance. It's just going to take up more of the storage. You can also change your power options, especially if you're using a laptop, a Windows laptop, or a tablet. We can make it where it would hibernate, and hibernate just is it's gonna create a file called hibernate.sys. It's gonna record all the open apps, the memory content, the app position on the screen, and when it pauses, it's gonna save all those status to the file. And when you press the power button to wake it up, it's gonna use that file in order to put everything back. Then for Windows 8, 10, and 8.1, Hibernate is not listed in the shutdown menu. So you can add the power options when you change that. Now for the power plan, you can use the power plan that would be increasing CPU performance. You can reduce CPU performance and brightness, so that way you save more power, especially on the laptop, or you can have it auto adjust. So to access power plan, you can also find this in settings, And in Windows environment, when you first install your OS and use your OS to access the internet, it automatically put you in either work groups and home groups, work group or home groups. On a desktop at, let's say, a company, and we haven't joined that desktop to a network or a domain, it will be part of the work group. On the Windows 10 Home, when you first turn it on, when you first bought it from the store, let's say a laptop, it will treat that as a home group. Now it's going to ask you for a network configuration. So on the workgroup environment, these systems can share folders. They can share files and printer. They're part of your wireless network or your small network. Workgroup does not require any kind of password to be able to access the workgroup. So therefore, it has limited security. So to create a workgroup, you would then need to make sure that all your IP addresses in the same range. And then what you can do is you can set up the unique computer information or computer name. And you would use that in control panel by right-clicking the computer to be able to access the setting and making sure that they're in the same workgroup. The default workgroup name is workgroup, but if you have other workgroups, you should be able to see it and be able to join them. So at home, you're already on the default workgroup. On the home group, this is a way that we can manage the small home office or small network at home or at a small business. And all the system will be treated as a peer-to-peer, where it doesn't control any other system in a higher range. It will just be equivalent in the role where it can share resources. Now, a single password would then be used for all the security for all the group shares. So it would automatically generate for the home group once that password is used. And once you join for the home group, you'll be able to access the resource that's shared. So here it talks about going to control panel, network and internet, and you can tap on the home group to create a home group. So we would be able to go here, and then you can go to this right here, and we will be able to connect to internet options or be able to change your network. So for number 14, it asks you Windows 7, Windows 8, 8.1, and Windows 10 support what type of Soho networks. We can say that they support home group and work group. And to access network share, we would then use on Windows 7, we can use it by mapping a drive letter to a folder in the File Explorer. So if you have a shared drive, you can use it to link it to a folder. We did a lab on this in Windows Server 2019. But on the server, it looks a little bit different that it has a location for file and storage. You can simply right-click the drive on your computer that you want to share, and you would choose Property and click the Share tab. Then, so for example, if I want to share my data drive, I simply right-click it, go to Properties, and I would be able to share this drive by clicking Sharing tab. And then for advanced sharing, I can select this folder and be able to add the share name, add the permissions on what, if I can have it read only, read write, and full control. So let's say I want to use this. I can select full control for everyone, or I can add a certain group of user and be able to allow them change and read, etc. And then click apply and OK. So that's how you can enable a shared drive, and you can mount that drive to a folder. But in a network environment, they will have a network drive, and then you can mount your shared folder to that drive and be able to access, so you can put things into that drive quickly. So here it talks about how you would be able to create a network share. For number 16, it asks you, how can a user access administrative share E on the network? How can the user differentiate an administrative share and a network share? So when there's an administrative share, what that will do is that the user would then be added to the administrator group, which has higher privilege than the original user group that they were in. So we have to add them into the group, and we would use the share options in Computer Management Console to create administrative share. So we would then go to Computer Management Console, to the shared folder, and then we would be able to manage that here. And as you can see, if there's administrative share, it would then have the $ next to it, as you would see the admin here. So they need to be an administrator in order to access it. So the example that I put here is that administrative share would drive letter would show the $ after the letter. So after the home group information, it talks about domain setup. And you can join a domain by using system property. And we can go to system property sheets. So what do I mean by this? Is if we go back to control panel, go to system and system here, I can go to system property, go to computer name, and then I would be able to click change. And here I would change it from workgroup to domain. But in this case, I would then have to set up my IP address and the DNS and the default gateway to be part of that domain. So what we have is we have how to set up the domain. Make sure that we know how to do this for A+, and I will create a lab where you would be able to do that. Network shares. So we are going to create network shares in that we have a shared drive. We would be able to map that drive, and that allows the user that's on the network, if they are given permission to access that drive, they will be able to use that drive, either read, write, or change, or modify. Administrative share, we would then know that it is a hidden share. Only administrator is supposed to be able to see that, or if they're in the administrator group. And it is noted with the $ as we mentioned. We can use Computer Management Console, go to System Tools, Shared Folders, and then click Shares. But again, we have to be part of the administrative group. So you can be part of the home group and be able to access your share. And you just need to enable your password, and that allows you to provide the share or access the share. Now to map the drive, here it talks about going using File Explorer. Right click the shared folder, select the map to letter drive. So let's say that if I have a folder, let's create a folder, and we call this test2. Test share. We're going to right click the folder, and let's say that we want to share this, and we can add the users to the share, or we can do it band sharing, share this folder to everyone, or permissions, we can give them full control. So once you have created the share, we can right click the folder, and with this what we can do is we would be able to change our share information, or we can allow the network mapping to this. So in this right here, it tells you that once you have that, you can right click the share folder in the network view and then select map the network drive. Select the drive letter and then be able to link it. So then that share folder is going to be tied to the network drive that is mapped, and you would be able to allow a specific group of users to be able to access that. So UNC is a universal name convention. This allows the user to access the network by using a path. So this can be a document in a certain subfolders on a certain drive. So UNC is going to be able to identify the target based on the path for a specific file inside a certain folder on a certain drive. Now on the last part is on printer sharing and network printer mapping. So if you have a printer that's installed, I think we did this for one of the lab, we can share a printer by right click that printer and choose sharing, and we can specify the sharing name and be able to add additional drivers. So in the case where somebody's accessing that, they will be able to use that printer as a shared printer with the supplied driver. So you can supply driver with that printer because they might not have the capability to download the driver, or they might not know how, so it's important to do that. You can use the printer IP address if it's on the network, or you can identify the shared printer by navigating to it. So in control panel, if you add the printer and if you add the network printer, then if you're on a domain environment, you would see Active Directory, and even on a printer would then be listed in the Active Directory. So you would be able to use the Find Printer in the Active Directory. Then you would be able to select it, and then you would be able to load the print driver. So in the last few part, it talks about how to set up your VPN settings, VPN connections. If you're not using a third party in Windows 8, you would be able to set up your network connections and set that up as a VPN. But if you're using a third party like Norton, McAfee, etc. that provides VPN, then you would use the application directly. So proxy sometimes is used for filtering or to be able to control network access. So in control panel, if you're using connections tab and then go to LAN setting, you can look at how you can set up your proxy server. Now on the server side, this would be either a NAT proxy or other form of proxy, but likely you would see that it can be used as a NAT proxy if you have two network interface cards. So Microsoft offers two things, remote desktop connection and remote assistance. They are different. Remote desktop includes remote assistance, which allows the user to invite another person to connect to the desktop. It uses a protocol called Remote Desktop Protocol, RDP. So to run Remote Assistant, you simply search for msra.exe. And this is what you would see. You can click Show Options, and then you can put in the information. Now we can manage on how it would look in the settings for that. And then in the advanced, you can also set up how you want it to notify you. So in Windows 7, there are three types of network location. There's home, there's work, and there's public. So when you choose home or work, you can configure the network connection for private. If you choose home, you can make your Windows Home Group network available, and you can use that for file and printer sharing. If you choose public, it's going to then make it an unsecured network, and that will be used for something like coffee shop, library, public type of access. So it lets you choose how you want to use the system and the type of network that you want to use. So going back to the question here, number 17, it asks you, Jonathan wants to configure share on a printer for his small business. What steps should Jonathan take to create the printer share in his business network? Jonathan can use devices and printers or printers and faxes folder. In Windows 10, Jonathan can click on settings and then go to device and printer. Then if the printer has already been selected and installed, then Jonathan would right click the printer and select sharing. Select share this printer and type in the share name. And then click on additional drivers to select the driver to install for other OS. And use so that way other type of system can use that same printer, or as it would be supplied through the media as prompted. So we would then need to have the driver ready in order to set that up. For number 18, how do you configure proxy setting in Windows 10? We would use the Internet property in Control Panel, then choose Connection tab and click on LAN setting. In the local area network settings, choose the appropriate option under Proxy and select a single proxy. Now, there are different types of proxy server that can be used, so we want to select Use the Proxy checkbox and click on the Advanced button. We would then specify the correct server and the port number to use. So in order to do this, you have to have a proxy server set up already and be able to link it to that proxy server. That's what the steps are about. 19. What program is used to send and receive remote assistance invitation? You would use msra.exe, which is for remote desktop assistance. So we can control our IP addresses. We can configure a different IP address. We can then go into settings. We would then go to network and internet. And then we can change the adapter options. If we right click the adapter and choose property, we would see this. So then we would be able to go down to IP version 4, click on properties, and you can specify the static IP, the subnet mask, the default gateway, and the domain. So when you join the domain, you have to do this. You have to set up the domain information. Now, here it allows you to also look at IP version 6 property, in that you would be able to do the same thing for version 6. Now, if you configure the adapter, you have the option to specify the type of property for that adapter depending on the adapter you're using, its driver, and also how you manage the power for that. So here it talks about the property, and then you can go to alternate configuration where you can set that up. Now on the network adapter, as I showed you, you can configure the connection, whether if you're using a network interface card, the NIC, you can change its connection settings. So half duplex are sometimes set to be auto, where it would switch back and forth. Full duplex mode enable the adapter to send and receive data at the same time, where half duplex is only going to either send or receive. It will not do both. So the benefit of having full duplex is that you do want to receive data while you're sending. And when we're using gigabit Ethernet or faster, what we would see is that we would be able to transmit packets much faster rate and receiving packets at much faster rate compared to if we're using something like dial-up or modem back in the days. Wake on LAN is a feature that allows all the connected system in the network to be wakened by receiving a signal from the network. This allows you to turn on many of the computers without physically pressing the power button and turn individual computer on. This needs to be enabled in BIOS or UEFI, and so that way the computer, even when it's turned off, this is going to wait for that signal, and when that signal is received in the network, all the system will be turned on if they are enabling the wake on LAN. So for the next question, what are the benefits of applying full duplex setting in the network? The network adapter can send and receive at the same time. You're going to receive double the throughput compared to half duplex. For 21, when should you configure wake on LAN setting in a PC? When the PC needs maintenance and network services. such as updates, reconfiguration, backup, etc. And for 22, what is the purpose of QoS? QoS stands for quality of service. This is used to optimize real-time traffic for streaming, such as voice over IP, streaming video, music services, and so on. In Linux, what type of utility you use to backup? You can use rsync or grsync or duplicity. And there are also Dupe application that you can use. So there are different versions or the release of Linux, and in general, each one would have some kind of backup option. So you would refer to the release documentation. For 24, Lisa wants to update her Ubuntu system. What tools should she use to obtain and install the updates? In command line or terminal, Lisa can use apt-get, such as sudo apt-get install updates. And a while back we did a lab on Ubuntu, so you've seen some of that, how terminal is used. 25, in Linux, which utility is used to schedule tasks, such as install patch? You would use crontab. And crontab is done through terminal, so it is the command that activate the schedule where you would be able to type in the time, which the hours, the day, the year, etc. for that task. So A+ will ask you on Linux and Mac OS, so make sure that we know how to use the other OS for maintenance and troubleshooting as well. And you now have access to virtual machine, so you'll be able to use that. And this concludes my video, so please make sure that we look through the notes, the chapters, information, and read through the chapters so that way you would get more understanding, and the notes also cover some of the details, so make sure we do that. Please let me know if you have any question. Thank you for watching the video.